Welcome to the Ford Podcast.
Hey, Thomas, just give Kari the microphone. Okay.
That's how every one of these podcasts should start.
That's how it should start. Just give her the microphone.
This is why I invite guests.
We have a special guest. Kari invited him to be on here. So
Paid him a couple bucks to say that.
Hey, welcome to the Ford Podcast. I'm your host, Thomas. This is my wife, Kari. And then we do have one of our best friends, a special guest speaker who's been here with us for revival at Crosspoint all week. Dave, you've done a great job, man.
Thank you.
It really has
Appreciate
been
that.
an awesome revival.
Yeah.
Really cool, really cool. But being here in Indianapolis, we're going to ask a couple questions, but he's from California. And so anytime we can have somebody like Dave on here, we'd love to get you on and kind of pick your brain about some things tonight. But first of all, tell us a little bit about yourself and where you're at, how long you've been there, your family dynamics, and probably about the last 10 years where you've been.
Yeah, so, the best thing about me is Jesus and Amanda. So Jesus, my Savior, and Amanda, my wife. We have 6 kids. Our oldest is serving at a ministry in Franklin Road, Tennessee, and with his wife. Our second is serving at a church in Matthews, North Carolina, with his wife. They've been there a year. And then my daughter is sophomore in college, getting a math and science degree. Then our youngest son is 16, junior in high school, enjoying all the things about being a junior in high school brings along, right? Sports, skipping school, pretending to be sick, all that kind of stuff.
That's it.
And then we have 2 little girls, a 5-year-old, her name's Emery, and then a 4-year-old, her name's Ella. So we go from 24 to 4.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
insane.
amazing.
Yeah. So
Oh,
married, college, high school, kindergarten, and
Pre-K or just
yeah,
home?
just stay at home. Stay at
Yeah,
home with
stay at
Amanda.
home.
Yeah.
That's
How old
awesome.
were you when you had your first kid?
21.
21. So
Yeah.
y'all were
Well, that's young.
Yeah. We got married young. We started life young.
Y'all did.
Young by today's standards, young even by like at that time our standards, but not young by like Great Depression standards. So I go by the Great Depression standards. Yeah, like they got married at 15. If they got married at 15, I got
Like
married.
the rest of human
You were old.
history. Pretty much.
Yeah. So we were old basically. Yeah.
But can you imagine a 21-year-old now getting married?
No, that's
It's
funny.
rare anymore.
Oh, man.
So my kids would always be like, when they're 20, they're 19 or whatever, they'd always be like, man, Dad, when you were my age, you were already married. And I'm like, okay, well, obviously I was so much more mature than you were.
We had it together.
You guys aren't ready, but
we were making great life decisions. I tell people like Amanda, I met Amanda in 8th grade at a church youth activity. And we had interest on and off. Like, I don't even know what dating is when you're at a church youth group. Like, what's dating? Like, oh, you mean we're going every place that the other 60 kids in the youth group are going?
Yes.
Okay, sure, we're dating.
It's a good date.
So, we had an interest. We got super serious our senior year of high school. And I think I knew at that point, like, this is the girl God has for me. And I've tricked her into thinking that I'm the guy God has for her, as every man has done with his wife. Right? You just trick her till she says yes, And so we got married, but we had a huge support structure.
Mm.
Yeah.
So my family was there. Her immediate family was there. Aunts, uncles, all a part of the church that we lived in. Her grandma was such a blessing to our family because they owned properties all around the city. So we rented a house for like pennies comparatively, so all of there's a lot that factored into our decision making. So clearly getting married young is not for everybody. But putting off marriage till you're 30 is probably not the right move either. And so, you have to take into consideration like a lot of factors, community, support, help, all those sorts of things. But, you can't be afraid to make that commitment. And so that's what Amanda and I did. We got married young. I got into ministry young. We had kids young. And I feel like God brought pastoring across our path at a very young age. I started pastoring a church. I had no business pastoring at the age of 28. And the
Were
Lord,
you 28?
yeah, and the Lord was great. He led us through all that. He was good in so many ways. God's people were faithful, and God was good.
Yeah.
And then after that, the Lord moved us to Long Beach, California. And we've served there at Long Beach, California now for the last almost 9 years. So that's where we've been. And love every minute of it. There's no life like this life, you know, and the life of serving Jesus isn't easy. Ministry is serious and difficult, but ministry isn't joyless. And that's to me like the driving force behind the thing for man and I. Yes, there's long nights and there's frustrating conversations and there's heartbreak and there's pain and there's walking with people through suffering. There's all of that. That's a part of ministry. But man, there's a joy that comes from that is unexplainable and apart from having done it, you know. So that's our story. Yeah.
I love you. You and Amanda have been like that for a long time too, because we've known y'all for over 15 years now. And I do feel that way. Even I was not pastoring yet. You were a couple years before us. But even then at a young age, you were probably 28, 29. You had joy then. Like you and Amanda were having a good time. And you were pastoring in a tough situation. And you know, it was a big church. And I mean, y'all had a lot going on. And yet you have always, that's authentic in you, brother, is the joy of the Lord resides inside of y'all.
Yeah, you know, but that's a battle, and you have to understand like stress points, anxiety points, depression points in your own heart. We all have different thresholds. We all have different scenarios that we can hold up under and some that we can't. And so it wasn't always like I'm just going to be joyful. I'm just like fake it till you make it type thing, you know. So there were definitely through that like real seasons of frustration and doubt and discouragement and depression. And then you start to learn, like, I'm either going to fall into a side of ministry work and people work that's just grumpy and cantankerous and unhealthy, or I'm going to fall onto a side that says ministry work is God's work. It's not mine. And so if I pastor this church and it becomes a church of 10,000, that's God. And if I pastor this church and it becomes a church of 10, that's God. So once you remove yourself from like the liability of being successful in ministry work, you find a lot more joy. And then when you pull back from that, the perspective you've also gained is ministry actually isn't about any of those things. It's just about people. And when you spend time with people, something good happens in you. You're like, the worst thing that we can think as a society to do to a criminal is to put them in solitary confinement, which teaches us that the opposite is true. That the best thing that we need for our spirit and our soul is to get around the people. There are not any better people in the world than the people of God. And the people of God can be the most refreshing, joyful, walk with you through trials, walk with you through suffering people that are on planet Earth as it ought to be. And there can certainly be the opposite of that. But my experience has been, I've just found more people that way. And I've just decided like, well, if you're grumpy, cantankerous, and bitter, and you don't like the fact that God's called you to ministry, we're probably not going to get along. And if you do like that, then we'll probably get along great because you love Jesus, I love Jesus. And our love for Jesus produces in us a love for one another and then a joy that comes alongside of that. So everyone has to figure that out themselves. And I would say that's not even true for marriage, like for ministry, but it's also true for marriage. And I think in marriage, it's really hard to resist like the cookie cutter approach. Like, here's what my parents did. Here's what, that family does. In every marriage, every person, every ministry calling is all unique. And so you have to remain sensitive to, you have to have a good sense of self-understanding. But you also have to have a spirit's understanding of what God's doing in you, through you, with you, and be okay with that.
Yeah, it's so good.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So something interesting about you guys is that, like, for the majority of your ministry since we've known you, I'm not going to say you've been boring, but you've been like drama free, right? You've been some of our friends that are kind of
that is the best compliment I can ever give.
Yes, it is, especially in this culture. But there hasn't been a lot of drama surrounding your family. Like, your kids are cool. There hasn't been all these, scandalous things that have come up, which is awesome. But you guys did something super outside the box 5-6 years ago. And you got into foster care.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. And as you said, it was kind of right as your family was aging into those older college years, getting married years. And now you have a 4 and a 5-year-old right when you were almost there, you're almost to the finish line. You're like,
I mean, you were close.
We were there.
Yeah, you're close. And not only did you start fostering, but then you ended up adopting.
Yeah.
So like that's a pretty non-boring, dramatic move for
yeah.
life. So it's super cool though.
Yeah.
Like that's amazing. So I really want to focus on that and kind of like lean into number one, just like take us to that like first moment where one of you said, here's an idea.
Yeah. Amanda was the initiator of us jumping into foster care. And I'll tell you, I wish I had like a great like story where I was like, I heard the voice of God and it was like foster, you know.
Just make it up.
Yeah, you know, our church, I'm sure like others observes Sanctity of Life Sunday. Mm-hmm. So the need to recognize the importance of life, specifically life in the womb. And so I had for 12 years done what a lot of churches do, preached a message about our belief and stance against abortion, which I think we need to affirm. We ought to say, we're against that. And then I got really convicted because I felt like, okay, how many different times can I say that I'm against this? You know, like I just preached the same sermon last year, like, and it feels redundant and repetitive to do it again and again. And sometimes the easiest thing to do is to stand in front of a group of people who all believe the same thing and just let's tell ourselves what we all already believe. Right. And so I felt like if Jesus were preaching to my congregation on Sanctity of Life Sunday, what would he challenge us with? Would he just stand up and tell us what we're against? I think he would tell us what we're against. But is that all he would do? Or would there be a call to follow him in some Christ-like behaviors or attitudes? And so I reached out to a pro-life organization in our city. There's 3 Planned Parenthoods in Long Beach, California. And there's very few pro-life organizations. And one of them is called His Nesting Place. They provide ultrasounds, housing for women who are domestically abused. They provide ultrasounds for women who are pregnant, considering abortion. They stand outside of the Planned Parenthoods and resist and petition, you know, and plead with these women who are about to make a life-altering decision, not just for themselves, but for the baby that they're carrying. And I met them one day, and I'm like, man, I'm super encouraged by your work. I live in California. I live in a very, very anti-life state, and we have some of the most progressive abortion laws. And I want to do something to help you guys. And she says, man, well, we could use diapers, and we could use, you know, clothes, and we could use bottles, and we could use blankets. And I said, come to our church, and like, I'll give you 10 minutes in the service to tell us what you guys are doing. And we took them. So she did. She presented her case. We took them all for support. And she challenged our church, like, Christians ought to consider foster care and adoption. And so it was just this thing she said. It went through my mind. Next year rolls around, and Sanctity of Life Sunday comes around. We invited them back, but I found a Christian foster care organization in Southern California, and I invited them to come and be a part of the service as well. So she gave her pitch about how they help women in like desperate situations. He gave his pitch about how Christian families can step in for foster care, and if you're super interested, come to the, you know, get to know you meeting afterwards. And honestly, Thomas, I sat there and I thought, no one's going to go to this meeting, and I'm the pastor, and I invited this guy to come, and I'm going to feel bad if nobody goes to his meeting. So I went and I sat on the front row, and Amanda sat next to me, and I listened to him talk about the great need for foster care in California, but America just in general. And Amanda leaned over like she's prone to do. She grabbed my leg and she squeezed my leg. And it was, you know, in marriage, you quickly recognize like nonverbal cues. Sure. Yeah. And that was her nonverbal cue. Like that was this, Dave, like this is speaking to me, you know? So I just kind of patted her hand or whatever. And we get in the car, we go home, and she's like, I think we should do that, you know? And I'm like, whoa, slow down, you know? It's like, slow down. And I'm like, our kids are like, we're about there. Gabe's at college. Gabe's almost at college. You know, Ethan's about to go to college. And Amanda said something that was so convicting to me because she said, you know, you never stop being a parent. So like, there's not a finish line in parenting. Like we think there is. Yes. Like they're out of my house, you know? Okay, well, guess what? That just means you're paying for their cell phone at their house. You know, that's all that means. You know, they're still on your insurance, but they live in a different state. That's all that means. And you never stop, right? The problems just get bigger. You know, they're not as easy to solve. The problems when they're little are easier to solve. The problems when they're big are hard to solve. And so Amanda says, we're never going to stop being parents, though. So, like, I don't even know what that means. And I'm like, oh, snap, she's right. You know, like, that's how I felt. You know, it's like hit me to the core, you know. And I just was like, okay, let's see it. Let's see what happens. And so we called up that Christian foster care organization. We asked them if they could put us in touch with some agencies because they can't certify foster families. And they function as like a middleman, you know, like a broker. You know, you could go with this organization. Here's good things about that organization, you know, all that kind of stuff. And so we did our homework. We jumped in. We took the classes. We got certified. And you take like, you know, it's like 16 hours over 8 weeks. You know, sometimes they can do it in a shorter amount of time. Just depends on the planning you have. And so we went and we sat in these classes, these parenting classes, which was hilariously funny. Like, and Amanda's like,
oh, I bet.
Amanda's like, here are these people teaching us about parenting who have no kids. You know, like, you know, if you're going to be parents, here's what I'm just looking at Amanda like, what are we doing here? Yeah, it was wild, you know. She's like, I got to rush home and feed my cats and water my plants. But let me tell you about kids before I do that, you know. And I'm like,
yeah, we got it.
Okay, if you had kids, you wouldn't have cats or plants. You know? So, but it was great. It was a great experience. That's how we started, you know. And that's really where it grew from there.
Yeah.
The more you learn, the more you know, the more you just say like, okay, like what can I do about this? And I believe that was Amanda's heart. That was our heart in this. Was just like, I don't even know where this road's going to take me, but I'm game to follow, you know, if that's what the Lord wants. And so we did. That was how we started. That was the beginning of it for us. Yeah.
How many kids have you had in foster?
So we have fostered technically 5 kids, but we've had as many as 9 kids through our door.
Really?
Yeah, no, and obviously not at the same time.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Everybody like had a heart attack. I'm never fostering. You know, I'm going to show up with a van full of 9 kids. Like, no, not
4 or 9. Who cares?
Not at one time. Not at one time. Breathe, everybody. Yeah. But not 9 in total that we've provided care for.
Yeah.
Is like the phrase. But 5 specifically that we've fostered, and like, so to be technically considered a foster child is because you've been removed from your biological family. So the state has deemed it unsafe for this child to stay with a kid, or this child to stay with their parents for one reason or another. And so they're always coming from a place of hurt. That's the tough part. And to no fault of their own. That's the hardest thing about all of it. Like, you know, what an adult chooses to do by way of like hurting themselves, or what an adult chooses to do by way of hurting another adult, you know, is one thing. But the true innocent party in foster care are the kids. That's the hard part of foster care, you know, because they're not even old enough to even understand, like, in many cases, what's even happening to them.
That's so tragic.
Yeah.
Were any of these kids that you had, of the 9, did any of them that had to go back to their parents, or was that a hard situation? Like, I always feel like for Kari, if we ever fostered, you have a kid that you love, they're in your home. Yeah. Was it ever tough, especially for a woman like Amanda, to have to release them back to?
Yeah. So the first foster placement that we were given is a little boy, and he was the ugliest little baby you've ever seen in your life. And Amanda hates it when I say that, but I tell Amanda all the time, I'm like, all babies are ugly, just so you know. Like, I've never seen a pretty baby. Moms don't agree with that. Ladies don't agree with that. But if dads, we're all honest, we're like, that baby's ugly. Accurate. Yeah, like it's the ugliest little thing, you know. They grow up, they become cute, but right now it's not cute. So, but this boy was on another level. No, he was ugly cute. He's like Benjamin Button cute, okay. And so he ends up at our house, and what they tell us is, so after we went through our certification, I told Amanda, I'm like, I just want to foster. That's what I want to do. Like, I feel like I could do that for a long time, have a baby for have a baby placed with us or a child placed with us for 6-8 months, work with the family, have the family, go through drug rehab or whatever counseling they have to, like the court is ordering for them, be a part of that family, that adult family's life, and have a chance to minister to them, provide a safe spot for this kid, and then that family gets reunified, and now we're a part of that family's life forever. Like that's like in my head. Plan. Yeah. Right. And then we can take 4 months off, and then we can jump back in, and we take 4 months off, and we jump back in. And so you can do that in foster care, but you have very little. Like the more restrictions you put on fostering, the fewer calls you get. So if you're like, well, I only want a girl, and it has to have blonde hair, and it has to have brown eyes, and she has to like. The more restrictions that like they can only, it's harder, but the broader you are, then the more children could come in your house. So you can do age limitations, you can do gender, you can do like, there's infinite amounts of like boxes that you could say, check, check, check. And one of the saddest things that happens is you get to this box and you get to the very end and like, do you want a child who's mentally handicapped or has physical disabilities, who is harmed in some way? Like they ask you every type of question imaginable. And so you just imagine, like, just put yourself in that situation. Like, what child would you say no to?
Right. Yeah.
Like that's hard, So we end up in a spot where this boy comes and stays with us, and the state says, the mom has lost 2 kids already. Her first child she had when she was like 15. Drug abuse, life of crime. She was a woman of ill repute. It was just not a good situation. And this baby is going to be like fast track adoption. So fast track adoption means like, because she's already lost other kids, the state doesn't typically give like the same amount of like 90 days, 60 days, rehabs. Like typically the state's like, okay, like, you hate to say it like this, but like it's a repeat offender. Right. And so they kind of move a little quicker. And so that's what they tell us. So I'm immediately like shifting my mentality to like, okay, we're not going to keep him for 6 months. Like we're going to keep him for good. Like this is my blindside moment. Like this is my, this is my NFL star, it's like, this is my head, I'm like, I got this, I can make this happen, And so one thing becomes another. We end up at these court appointed family visits. The mom shows up, and she shows up, and you'll appreciate this, Kari, but with fingernails like an inch and a half long, and she wants to change the baby's diaper.
Oh my. And
she tells Amanda, she's like, I don't even know what to do. Can you help me? Oh, wow. So as a mom, Amanda's just like, okay, let me help you, And so Amanda really took like this motherly role for this lady. And one thing became another, and they end up in conversation. She's like, I heard you guys were Christians. And Amanda's like, yeah, my husband's actually a pastor, And they're like, she's like, I've never been to church. So the next thing, Amanda brings her a Bible. The next meeting, she's like, I never had a Bible. What's the story of the Bible? So Amanda tells her about Jesus, and sitting of all places in the back of a Chick-fil-A, wow. Amanda leads Stephanie to the Lord. Aww, and cool. In our mind, I'm still thinking like, that's great. His mom got saved. If she cleans her life up, like she could totally be a part of his life when he gets older, because he's going to be with us. It's fast track adoption. So we end up at the next court meeting, the court date, and they're a ward of the state until they're not a ward of the state. That's how foster care goes, So even when you're given a child, it's not like, that's the hard part of foster care. It's not your child. Right. And, tell a mom that who's just been given a baby who's 6 days old, right. Like this isn't yours, but you keep it safe. Right. Like, so
that's tough.
Yeah. And so the court says, the boy needs to be reunified with his mom effective immediately. Gavelled. So Amanda couldn't go to court. She just like couldn't bring herself to do it. But I went, and I remember sitting in the back of the courtroom like, wait, what just happened? Wow. So I rushed home. Gabe was at work. I called him. I said, hey, ask your boss if you can come home early. They're gonna take the baby boy. And so they call us and they're like, do you guys want to drop the baby off, or you want us to come pick the baby up? And I just couldn't bring myself to put him in a car and take him and drop him off. Like, it just, nothing inside of me as a parent could like bring myself to that moment. And so I said, well, if you guys can come pick him up, that would be great. And I remember just sitting there, they take the baby, and it was just like silence in our whole house. So foster care for us wasn't Amanda and I decision. It was a family decision. So when we decide we're going to do this, we sit all of our kids down. Our youngest son at that point was 11 maybe. And we're like, hey, here's what we think God's doing. But you're not bystanders in the will of God for our lives. We're a family, and God's will for me is God's will for you, and God's will for you is God's will for me. So let's make this decision together, and you guys can take time to think about it, and you don't have to make a decision today, and let's pray about it. And every one of my kids was like, yes. And I'm like, are you guys sure you don't want to wait? Like, we can all wait. It's fine. We can wait,
You need to pray about that.
And so now we're at this place where this baby is like, gone. And he, like to my boys, that was their brother, and to Elena as well. And so he leaves, and I just remember we're all in our bedroom. I'm literally sitting on the floor. My kids are strewn all throughout my room. Elena's on my bed crying. Amanda's sitting next to her. And I remember thinking, like, I never want to do this again. Never. I never want this again.
So hard.
And so I told Amanda, I'm like, I'm going to tell the social worker we want a couple of weeks, because they're like, hey, we know the baby got taken, but we can jump you guys right back in the system if you want. They're like, and there's that many kids. That's the unfortunate reality. We can talk about that later. But I'm like, I think we need a couple of weeks. Just take us off the list for a little bit. So we wait 2 weeks, and Amanda comes, and she puts her hand on my knee. She does a little squeeze, and I'm like, okay, she wants something, And so I'm like, what's up? And she says, I think we should tell them we're ready to start foster care again. And I'm like, no, we're not, though. And she's like, I think we are. And I'm like, but I think we're not. And she's like, I think we are. And I'm like, the kids aren't. And she's like, I think you're not. And I'm like, no, family meeting. Like, let's go, family meeting right now.
Vote.
Yeah, I'm like, guys, mom says I'm the person, like, and I know you guys are all hurting from this thing too. And they're like, yeah, it hurt, but like, if someone can handle the hurt, it's us. And essentially, this is what foster care is. Foster care is, it's not bringing a child into your home. Foster care is providing a home for a child who doesn't have a home. And that perspective is very important to understand. Because if you see this as, here comes this kid into my life, I get to bring him in, then you're going to be hurt when the child is reunified, if the child is. But if you see foster care as, no, we have a home. Like, our family has love, our family has joy, our family has all these things, and we have enough of it to go around, then you have a very different perspective. So it's really putting your family at the disposal of a kid who needs a family. And that's the key. It doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. Of course it hurts. It always hurts, Any relationship that's severed is a relationship that hurts, because we're relational beings, But it doesn't hurt any less, or doesn't hurt any more if it's a foster care, if it's your biological kid. Wow. So I told our church the night that the baby boy was reunited with his mother. I told our church, and they were so kind to Amanda and I, but we had midweek service that week, and I told our church, I said, the reality is, I could lose my biological kids tonight. Like, a tragic accident could happen on the way home. So we all think, well, these are my kids, and I'm going to have them forever. So there's no way I could have loved this kid who I might only get the chance to love for a year. But the reality of life is, no, it's a vapor. You are not promised 18 years with your biological kid. Right. But no parent would say, well, I don't love my biological kid now because I might get hurt if they were taken from me. Right. No, you would say, yes, I might get hurt if my child was taken by the end of the night tonight. Of course. But I wouldn't trade that. However painful that would be, I wouldn't trade that for the experience of having been in my child's life and my child having been in my life. Yeah. And if you view foster care in that lens and through that perspective, then you quickly recognize Here's someone who doesn't deserve the hurt that they've experienced. They're truly the innocent party. Mm. And my family has enough love to be there for however long we get to be there. Yeah. And for some people, they hope that that's a lifetime. For other people, they hope that's 6 months or 8 months or a year. I've met all kinds of people in different stages of foster care through our journey. And everyone kind of does it for a different reason or a different purpose. But I believe as God's people, we ought to do it because we, of all people, have the most love, the most joy, the most peace, and the best answer to what a lot of these families are facing. Right. So that's the hard part of it. That's a long answer to your question. But, you know, a lot of times in my conversations that I have with people about foster care, this is typically the first thing they ask. Like, well, what if it goes bad? Right. According to my standard. Right. And I always just say to them, like, it's already bad. Mm. It's already bad. Right. There's nothing good about foster care. Mm. Right? Like, that's how we got here. Yeah. So someone has to be willing to say, this is a bad scenario, but I can do a little good. Like, I can do something. You know, I can't do everything, and not everyone should, but I can provide some sort of hope in a bad situation. I think that's what we're called as Christians to do. Yeah.
That's so amazing. So out of all the 9 kids that you had kind of in and out, was everyone a possibility for adoption? Did you hope each one would be adopted? Yeah. Or how did you come to the place where these were the girls? Yeah. This was the moment. And are you still fostering after this adoption, or are you finished with the adoption?
So, so this 2-week break we get, and I call the family meeting. My kids are all like, yeah, Dad, it's you. You know, I'm like, okay, well, that's because I'm the only one with a heart. And my kids are like, yeah, you're emotional. You know, so, okay, fair enough. You know, so we call social worker and say, like, hey, like, put us back in the game. Like, we're ready for this. And the next day we get called. The next day.
Oh, my lands.
But the next day is COVID. The world shuts down. So we get called on COVID. Wow. And they say, we have a baby girl. She's in the hospital. All kinds of drugs in her system. Our mother walked in, delivered her, and walked out.
Oh, my word.
The name that the mother gave her, she wasn't going to give her a name. And so the nurse is like, you need to write a name on her birth certificate. And the lady's like, well, what's your name? The mother says, what's your name? And the nurse says, my name is, and tells her name. And she goes, okay, call her that.
Oh my word.
And walked out.
Wow.
So we get called, and they say, we have this baby. She's addicted. She's not eating right. She's severely malnourished. No prenatal care, nothing, you know. Our mom used and abused drugs the entire pregnancy, among other things. And so, you know, are you guys interested? And we're like, yeah, we're game, you know. So 4 days later, they brought her to our house in a onesie that was turned upside down because she was so little. So her legs are through the arms, and then it's like buttoned sideways over her shoulder. And then like the roughest, coldest hospital blanket that you could imagine, you know, because it's March at that point or something like that, you know. So it's not, and you know, Southern California March isn't like Indianapolis March, but it's still not warm. And so what they tell us is like, so they have all kinds of like checkpoints. So you go like 72 hours, and there'll be a court hearing about the child. They'll determine if there's like viable family or biological, or like what's the condition of the parents. So dad's in prison, mom's nowhere to be found, but there's a biological grandma. And so the social worker says, looks like she'll be reunited with a biological grandma. She's interested, but I got to go make the visits, got to go do the scene. So in my head, I'm like, perfect. Like, we're going back to plan A. We're just going to like foster kids for 6-8 months, get them back to family. Sure. We move on, get 4 months off, you know, whatever. And so that's how we're planning. We're planning that way for 2 years. COVID slows things down, obviously. So court isn't always in session, and family visits aren't always happening. And so typically the foster care system wants a child placed in permanency within a no longer than a 24-month period. So like if you start backwards, so this child has to be either back with mom and dad or with a grandma or with a foster family here. And so if you just kind of work backwards, then you go, well, if that were to happen, then they'd have to have 90 days to appeal what they call termination of parental rights, so TPR. And then they have this date that they got a math, and then they got this date, and then they got, you know, so you start walking all the math backwards. And then you end up like, okay, well, this baby is going to be given to biological family probably within the normal situation. And everybody in foster care is immediately going to laugh at that. But like, there's just nothing normal about foster care, but that's their plan. Okay. But COVID slows all that down. So we end up with her for a longer period of time than we should have been. And at the same time, the mom gets pregnant again, delivers another baby, same way. Oh. Goes to the hospital. 10 months later, goes to the hospital, delivers baby, walks out. Same scenario. So they call us and they say, hey, baby girl 1 has a sister, baby girl 2. Same biological mom, same biological dad.
Wow.
Are you guys interested? And Amanda's like, I think we are. And I'm like, I think we're not. Like remember one, and we're going to like foster, then take a break. Foster and take a break. She's
Your
like,
plan's not going so well.
No, exactly. Yeah. And so Amanda says, baby girl 1 is going to go with grandma. So when that happens, then we can have baby girl 2, her sister, take care of her. That provides unity. And then when grandma's ready, baby girl 2 can go to grandma, and we can be a part of all this. And I'm like, well, okay, that makes sense, actually. So okay, let's do it. So we bring 2 babies into our house 10 months apart, which was wild. But we had a lot of help. Our kids were there. Our kids are older at that point, and it was amazing. And long story short, then the grandma goes to apply for foster care, and she lies on her application. And they don't really care if you have like a criminal record. They kind of understand that, but they care if you lie. And so if you lie, that just throws a wrench in everything. And so that happened. So it slowed it down another year. And then at that point, the grandma's at a particular age. She's already raising 3 other kids that the mom has. So our 2 girls have 3 siblings on the mom's side and 3 other siblings on the dad's side. And the girls are at this point are 2 and 3. And we get a call from the social worker that says, mom's delivered another baby. This time a baby boy. Same scenario. This one she just named baby boy and walked out. So are you guys interested? Well, at this point for us, like biological family's off the table. And so like once biological family, once they go through the list, right? Like there's no grandma, there's no aunt, there's no uncle. Then they look to the foster family. Like, are you guys interested? Because they're trying to provide some sort of unity for these kids. Like the fewer disruptions, the better. Sure. So, and there's clearly bonding. These 2 babies have been with us for 2 years, 3 years. Like there's an attachment. So, we're at that point like, okay, we're going to adopt these kids. But then baby boy comes along, and Amanda's like, I think we should do it. I'm like, I think we shouldn't. But at this point, God's done something pretty cool for our church in that we have a group of people in our church who've all now gone through foster care through these Sanctity of Life emphasis Sundays. And one of those families stepped forward and say, hey, we'd be willing to foster and adopt him if you guys aren't interested or aren't going to do it. And it's not even really that we weren't interested. It's just more like capability. It's not really interest, it's not even really heart. It's just like where we were. It's this stage of life sort of thing.
Yeah, right.
And I told Amanda, I'm like, we've already got 2 kids under the age of 3. Like we aren't 20 anymore. Like you don't have the same energy that like I did when I was 20. I would have been like, let's do it. Like what's another one at this point? Just throw them in the back of the van.
We know all about that.
So Amanda says, well, I think this other foster family is interested in they go to our church. And so I said, let's ask the social worker if we could recommend a foster family, which is pretty unique because they got a list of people that they want to
Sure.
like work through. But because of the biological connection to us, like with our girls, and because of the connection we have by way of like the brother will stay in the girl's life and the girls will stay in the brother's life.
That's cool.
You know, to some extent, you know, they agree. So that foster family takes baby boy. So you fast forward now about 2 years, which is to this last summer. And last August, we adopted the girls officially. And a few months before that, that foster family adopted that boy officially. And so, you know, just like I said, there's nothing normal or functional about foster care. Every bit of foster care is dysfunctional. And that's the hard part of foster care, because we come from a perspective of like, well, we want some like functionality. We want some normalcy. But you have to understand that you're not in foster care if there's normalcy.
Yeah.
Right? The fact that you're even here means there's something dysfunctional about it. And the more you resist that dysfunction, the harder foster care and adoption becomes. And the sooner you realize, like, this is a bad scenario all the way around. So let's make as much good of this scenario as we possibly can for as long as we can, then you can make a difference. That's what I'm telling you. Like, anybody can make a difference in foster care in this way. And so, so we adopted those 2 girls in August. Our fostering license is still open. We fostered one little girl for a little bit. She went back to her family, and then we're doing what is called respite care right now. So there's a foster mom, a single mom who needs basically like half a week to do like her work. And so we keep a little girl half a week. So like Wednesday to Saturday, we keep her with us. You know, so our little girls call her our weekend sister, you know, so it's super, cute. Yeah, it's super fun. And that's a part of like having to just embrace what's not functional.
Yeah.
You know, having to just embrace what's, there's a sense of dysfunction about this.
Yeah.
That the more you resist it, the more frustration you're going to find in foster care. So our license is open. You know, to answer the question, Kari, like, I would say no, we're not going to foster, we're not going to adopt again or foster again. But Amanda has yet to have her say. As it goes, if mom ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. You know,
It doesn't sound like anyone's listening to your plans.
No, that's what I'm saying. That's my point. Like, guys, I'm the head of this house. You know,
they all had a family meeting without you.
Without a doubt.
All
Without
of a sudden,
We're just going to tell Dad what we're going to do here.
That's my favorite part of this whole story.
Yeah. The amazing thing about foster care is this, and this answers your question in a different way. So whenever I talk to people about foster care, they immediately like, I can't adopt. Like, I can't. Like, the two immediate answers. Number one, I couldn't handle it if they took the child away. And my answer is always, how much love do you have? That's my question to you. Right? Because that's what this kid needs. This kid doesn't need you to necessarily be their forever home. This kid needs you to just be a home. So foster care is not about gaining a child. Foster care is about providing something for a child for as long as that child needs it. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, so that's always the first question. And the second, what would I do if they took the child away? And then the second question is always, I can't adopt. Like, so I'm out. You know, like, that's great. I'm really glad you do that. That's good for you to do. But I can't foster. And I always say, you don't have to. Like, there's 1,000 ways to help in foster care outside of fostering or adopting. There's hundreds of ways. Like just an example, foster care, if a child is entrusted to your care, you cannot leave that child with another family for longer, or even a babysitter, for longer than 48 hours without the approval of the state. So, and the state won't just approve anybody, obviously, and rightfully so, right? Like, they shouldn't, you know. So the state will only allow you to leave that child for longer than 48 hours with an approved family. So it's what's called respite care. So somebody who's gone through respite care is somebody who's certified by the state. They do have certification and training, but not nearly as much training as it requires for fostering or for adopting. But they're approved to provide care for a child on a short-term basis, like a week or 2 weeks. Like, here's this foster family who's been running here, running there, running there. They can't leave the county. They can't leave the state because of family visits, which are whatever, anywhere from an hour a week to 6 hours a week, depending on, sometimes it's 6 hours a week, but with the mom and the dad because they're not together. So you've got 12 hours of family visits you've got to take care of. So now imagine, factor into that, like, well, when does that family go on vacation? And when your church hosts a couples conference, they can't go because it's not as simple for them as like, well, just call the teenage girl who's a little bit older and let her come and watch our kids. Right. It's not that easy because if something happens, that child isn't their child. That child's a ward of the state. Yeah. So respite care by itself is an unbelievable gift to foster families. So what it does is you say, well, I can't foster, I can't adopt. I totally get it. But there are families who can, and there are families who do, and there are families who would, if they were supported. If there were somebody in their life that said, listen, what you're doing is incredible. It's truly James 1:26 ministry, pure religion undefiled before God. And it's this: care for the fatherless and the widow. No one more vulnerable in our society than them. Right. So no one more innocent than the kid who's being taken away from his family for a choice that his family made, he didn't make. And so to come alongside of somebody and say, I can't do it. I'm not at the stage of life where I feel like I'm capable of providing care that way. But I completely admire that you're doing this. And I just want you to know I'm here to help you. Yeah. So we'll get respite care. We'll be your vacation provider. We'll make sure you and your husband can still get the time you need. And anytime you need us, you call us. Like, we're there for you guys. Or things like the church. So, when baby girl 1 showed up at our house, she showed up in a used car seat, which the social worker kept. And then a onesie turned upside down. That was it. Three infant diapers, that the hospital had. No clothes, no bag, no formula, nothing, nothing. And so, like, as the broader church community that says, hey, let's show up for them, and your church like ours, I'm sure when a baby's born in our church, our people jump to action, those that family doesn't make a meal for the next 30 days, like, as it ought to be, as it ought to be, and a lot of times, like, a church will throw like these baby showers and they do like these registries. So why would we not do that for foster care? Like, why would we not say to this family who's taking this journey, like, hey, what you're doing is incredible. We're here. Like, you tell us. Let's be there for them in that way. And so if a child is placed in foster care, the church ought to be just as responsive to that, in my opinion, as if it were the normal child being born into the church family, and how everybody would celebrate that. So, and the sad reality of this is that because of the first 2 immediate, like, I couldn't handle the heartbreak and I can't foster, we don't push, we don't lean in to this. And there's lots of people who are leaning in, and most of them don't have good intentions. They don't have a proper worldview or a good philosophy. They're living in ungodly ways, and they're capitalizing in this field, because for the most part, Christians and the church are absent. And we're absent ignorantly. I don't believe we're absent because we're indifferent. I think we're just absent because we don't know. Right. Like, we don't know how to help, so tell me how to help. Right? That's the idea. Like, if you tell me how I can't foster. I literally, like, I tell my church all the time, not everyone should foster.
Right. Right.
Not everyone should. I can name a couple people if you want me to. Like, you don't need kids, okay? Yeah. You know what? Senior adult ministry is better for you, okay? You know? But, like, so not everyone can, not everyone should. Mm-hmm. But what is true is everyone, according to the James 1:26 call, is, I believe, commissioned by God to do something to help in this way. You've got to do something. Yeah. You don't have to take a kid. You don't have to do that, but you got to do something. You got to get involved in this way. So, you know, that's my passion, is to just say, like, how can we help as many people as possible? Yeah. Mm-hmm. These, in this field and in this way, these children need our help. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Like, they need our help. They're hungry for our help. Mm-hmm. And the church is the best solution to the problems that these families and these kids are facing. We hold the answer. The answer is Jesus. Amen. That's the point, right? Amen. So, a long answer to your question, but that would be the answer. Yeah.
That's so good. So, what would you say? You know, step one, call your local agency. Yeah. Say, we represent a church. Give us some basics. How can we start out?
Yeah, step one, call a foster agency. Yeah. And there's Christian foster care agencies everywhere. They're you know, especially in a major city. Any major city, there's going to be Christian or, you know, family-friendly foster care agencies that are hungry to have somebody come alongside and just hold their arms up a little bit and help them in the fight, you know. And
the process takes a little while up front. It's not in a foster care, so we're getting a baby tomorrow.
Yeah, so like you could, so if you're in a foster, there's a process. Yeah. But if you're talking about, like, what do I do to just help? Right. Like, so if you're listening to this, you're like, man, I'm super burdened by that. I want to do something. I would say find a Christian foster care organization or a foster care organization in general, and invite them out, like, to your church, or go meet them at their office, or just say, hey, I'm a Christian. I go to church nearby. I'm just wondering, do you guys need help? You need volunteers? Like, I'm more than happy to help in some kind of way. Most of them have, like, registry list or email list or, you know, needs lists that they circulate amongst themselves. So it's like anything, the foster community is a sub community. Like, cool. When you foster and you meet somebody else who fosters, there's, like, this immediate, like, oh, yeah, tell me your thing, because I know you got a thing, because I got a thing. And, like, there's an immediate, like, I get it, like, I've been where you're at, connection, and that expands a church's and a Christian's platform of ministry, because you start pressing into fields where the church, just for the most part, is absent. But it's like anything else. If you show up like, hey, I've got the answers, then you're probably not going to get very far. But if you show up and you say, hey, I want to help, and we have resources.
That's cool.
Tell me what to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah. They will respond. So that would be my first thing, if that's where you're at. My second thing would be, everybody, I believe, ought to consider foster care or adoption. And I think everyone ought to consider it to the degree that says, I'm willing to do that. Or, I don't feel like God wants us to do that because of our age and stage of life. I totally get that. But we've prayed about it, and we're not going to foster or adopt, but we're going to help people that do. And we're going to be the community that they need in order to facilitate this. So, like, our church last summer hosted a foster family day off. So we had our workers, our normal, typical nursery workers who are certified and background checked, and that whole thing, right? We got clean spaces. We've got a nursery. Yeah. We've got toys. We've got a playground. We've got the facility. So we just contacted our local foster care agencies and said, hey, if you want to tell your families about our event, they can sign up here. And so they did. And they did in droves.
Wow.
And so we stood there, they signed up, they dropped their kids off. 27 kids ended up being a part of that day.
Wow.
It was wildly amazing. We had, I think, 18 families that participated. These are people that we would have never connected with.
Yeah.
We'd have never had any contact with. And their kids, it was wild because their kids are getting picked up and their kids are like, can we stay longer? Can we stay longer? Like they just loved it, you know?
Yeah.
And we had games. And I mean, we put on like a mini VBS, you know, like minus some of the like Bible lesson type stuff, just because you're not really allowed to do a lot of that. But you can make it, like they're coming to our campus, they're dropping their kids off at our church. Like,
they know who you
and
are
now they know who we are, and they know we care. Like they know that we're in this for them. And so, you know, host a foster family day off. Find a foster family in your church. Hey, can I help? Like, can I get respite training? Could I get live scan, background checked? I just want to know, like, I'm there to help you. If you know a foster family that is going to foster or adopt, partner with them. You know, when an infant is taken into foster care, it's typically out of the hospital, but there's more non-infants in foster care than infants. Yeah. Because most foster families who get into foster care want an infant. That's what everybody wants, right? So nobody wants the 10-year-old who has problems. That's the hard case. Yeah. So one of the most difficult parts of our journey was when we finally got approval. The placement worker came and sat in our living room, and she had a stack of papers this thick. It was unbelievable. And it was just like Excel spreadsheet, just all the way across the page. And she says, this represents every child in LA County who's available for foster care or adoption today, which was over 30,000 kids.
Oh, my word.
You're kidding.
Available today, right now. Wow. So if you got certified today, you could call, and any of those 30,000 kids could immediately be placed. They're available today. And so that's not counting any kid who's coming in, like which is hundreds.
Good.
So it's a never ending.
The need is great.
It's a never ending mission, Phil.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's 400,000 kids, almost 400,000 kids in foster care in the entire United States system today. There's almost 400,000 evangelical churches in the world today. If every church had one family that foster or adopt, problem solved. And the reality is the problem isn't solved. Because man's nature is sinful. Yeah. Abuse, neglect, and trauma happen.
It's prevalent.
So there's going to be a replacement. And if you took every kid out of foster care and placed them with the family today, there'd be 40,000 more tomorrow. That's the reality of it. Right. And so it's a long-term strategy that we as a church and we as Christians have to develop that says, okay, I want to be able to do this for the long term, which is why I tell people, like, maybe foster care or adoption isn't your answer. Maybe that's not the answer you have. Maybe you can't do this long term. Like, not everyone can take an infant and say, I'm going to be this baby's mom till they're 18, and then I'm going to be whatever that baby needs me to be afterwards. And I'm here for whatever that drama is, right? And I'm going to sit in that, and I'm going to welcome it. And then the final thing I would tell you is, by way of helping, is you have to understand that when a foster family is dealing with a kid, it is different than any other family in your church. It's different than any other scenario that you might face because of the trauma that kid is bringing from the situation that they were in. Yeah. And so any behavioral problems are to be expected. Like, you think about how bad my kids misbehave, and I'm their dad and Amanda's their mom, and they've never been yanked out of our home by strangers. Yeah. So now compound that. And that's what a foster family deals with and goes through. And so there's a lot of, I can't go to the church because there's going to be a sense of judgment. I can't go to the church because my kids are rowdy. I can't go to the church because my kid acts out, and my kid gets judged as like, oh, that's the foster kid over there. And they get treated otherly instead of just being treated as who they are, which is an image bearer. And so, like, understanding from our perspective, like, these families are in a very difficult spot. They're trying to provide help to someone who's hurt, at no fault of their own. And a lot of that's just not as easy as like a Band-Aid. It just can't be that simple. And so you have to be willing to meet that family where they are, understand where that kid is, and just say, like, we're going to love them through that. Like, we're just going to, this happens to us all the time. You know, people will be like, especially when we were first fostering, they're like, now, do you guys want to adopt her? Do you want to adopt her?
Yeah.
Which is like the worst question you could ever ask a foster family.
Yeah.
Right.
So saying to a foster family, do you want to adopt, is not a helpful question to ask, because of course they want to care for that family, for that child, for as long as they can. The other thing would be saying something to a foster family like, well, is his mom or is her mom a drug addict, or is their dad in prison? Because there's so much of that child's story that belongs just to that child. And
that's good.
You're if the child stays with the family and is a part of your church community at some point, then how much of your church community do you want knowing that this child's parents were, had issues or struggles while the child's 6 and he can't understand it? So now he goes to school and every kid in class knows, well, that's not your real mom. So there is a appropriateness to learning how to ask questions, help foster families, being discerning toward even like just behavioral issues. So like with our biological kids, for example, when Amanda was expecting another child, our kids would always go, "Mommy, was I in your tummy?" And Amanda would always go, "Yeah, of course." So we're at church the other day, and our oldest adopted girl sees a lady at our church who's expecting, and she says to Amanda, "Mommy, was I in your tummy?" That's a tough answer. You know, she's 5, so she's gonna remember, right? That's a seed planted. And so Amanda says, "I think it's time to like tell our kids like that we need to help them understand it." And we've read them adoption books. We celebrated their adoption day. We celebrate their birthday. We celebrate their adoption day. We celebrate their foster day. We celebrate every one of these moments because we want it to be natural. We don't want them to turn 16 and then go, wait, I was adopted? I'm not. Like, your biological child. So the more you embrace a dysfunction, the easier it is. And so our girls had these big sliding mirrors in their room. And so Amanda got this mirror chalk and she drew this tree on their mirror. And she got pictures of their siblings on their mom's side, siblings on their dad's side, the little boy who the other family, foster family in our church adopted, picture of our kids, picture of grandparents, placed them all on the tree, and then a picture of their birth mom and put her right in the middle and said, "That's your tummy mommy." Now we're your parents, like I'm their dad and that's your mom. But and we told them her name, this is her name, and she's your tummy mommy. She carried you, she brought you into this world, and she loved you enough to provide life to you. But she couldn't take care of you. And so that's where we stepped in. We stepped in to take care of you. And so you're special because look at your tree. Your tree has so many branches on it. That's what makes you special. Well, I never had that talk with my kids. I never had to tell my kids anything like that.
No.
So a foster child has gone through emotionally, like we haven't even touched what they've experienced, like physically by way of abuse or trauma, but emotionally, a foster child is so much more mature than a child with the same birth mom and dad in the same home, in the same safe structure, there's never been removal or dysfunction in that sense. A foster child is so much emotionally further down the road than a kid from a traditional home, just by having been born. And again, to no choice of their own. So how you help a foster family and a foster kid is you understand that. You understand this child emotionally is further than even my own kid at this age might have been and probably is. And so I have to have a sensitivity toward them, and I have to have a sensitivity toward that. Not so sensitive that I treat them different, but sensitive enough that I realize they're different.
Yeah.
You know? So we couldn't.
That's okay.
And that's okay. That's
beautiful.
That's their story.
Yeah.
That's what you have to celebrate. That's their story. That's what makes them special. And the more you treat them like, well, that's what makes you different, the more they resent that and the more they run from that. But the more you help them celebrate that. Yeah. That somebody loved you enough to bring you into this world. Mm-hmm. And somebody loved you enough that even though they didn't bring you into this world, they provided care for you in this world. Mm-hmm. And that's what makes you who you are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's cool.
And the more you celebrate and embrace that, the more beautiful the picture of adoption and foster care becomes. Mm-hmm. And the more you realize, like, oh, that's what we're doing here. Mm-hmm. We're not just trying to grow a family. We're trying to give a family to somebody in need. And the more that you have that perspective, the further you can go with this. Yeah. And so, you know, and I could probably talk, honestly, Kari, for like, I could do another hour on like all the different ways because it really is, it's infinite. Mm. It's infinite. Like, just put yourself in that spot and go, okay, if I were that person, what would I want somebody to do for me?
Right.
You know, I probably wouldn't want 100 questions because I can't even answer them. Mm-hmm. Like, the answer is, I don't know the answer, you know? Right. So I'm not just going to pepper that person with questions. I'm just going to say, hey, we're here to help if we can. Mm-hmm. And then start providing some of that practical help.
That helps. Yeah. This entire conversation has been really awesome. People, these are off. People are going to want to know more. They're going to have questions. I know we do already. And like you said, it's endless. So what is the best way? Somebody's listening to this. Hey, we want to talk to Dr. Dave Delaney. Yeah. We want to know. What is a handle or a DM they can shoot in? You have your own podcast. Tell us a little bit about that. And then what's the best way to contact you? Hey, we've got some prayer requests. We want to know. What's the best way?
Well, if it's on social media, it's just Dave _ Delaney on X, Instagram. You can email me, pastordelaney@gmail.com. I prefer that. Okay. If they're members of your church or friends of yours, they can get my number from you. I have zero problem with that. You can 100%. You're free to give that out to anyone who's interested in this conversation, not just somebody who's mad. Right. So we'll screen those. Yeah, but you know, I mean, honestly, you know, that's what I would tell them. You know, we're here to help. Every journey into foster care is a different journey. Yeah. It's unique to everyone. It's unique for every individual, every family. No two stories are the same. I've heard hundreds of stories of foster care. No two stories are the same, and it's what makes foster care such an incredible thing. Yeah. But what I would want them to know is, like, they're not alone. Yeah, cool. We're here to help. You know, and I know that that's your all's heart. Yeah, that's our heart. So you tell us how we can help, and we'll be there.
Awesome. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on here. It's been a great help. Hope it's been a help to everybody who's tuned in this week. And for sure, people have questions. We're going to shoot them your way, and we'll be praying for you. And what a great journey you guys have been on, and you're an inspiration to so many. So absolutely. And major shout out to your wife, Amanda.
She gets all the credit.
Honestly, the most selfless woman. She is amazing. Yeah. She really is. Pretty awesome. And I can say that I know her personally. Like, this is truly awesome. Just who she is.
Yeah, she would love to be here because she would have corrected all the things I said.
So the next time you're in town, it will be her.
We'll put her on. Part two. Awesome. I hope y'all have a great week. Thanks so much again. Appreciate it.